Well, hey everyone, happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I am Katie, joined by Chris and John. Howdy, fellas.
Hello.
Woo, we got it. First try.
It's even working this week.
Oh, well, yeah. So last week, for those who tried to tune in and then hopefully eventually did, something happened with our StreamYard and it was haunted and a poltergeist came in and there was a ghost instance. All very scientific. This week, we're good. We're here. We are talking about agentic product marketing with ICPs. Now, this is really interesting because where we thought we were going to go with this is not where we ended up going with this. And so we originally thought we were going to be demonstrating how to use OpenClaw to do product marketing with your ICPs. But Chris, as of less than 12 hours ago, that changed. Do you want to just speak to that a little bit before we No, and I think it's a good thing to bring up, but do you want to speak to what happened and why we're taking a different course?
Sure. So OpenClaw, for those who don't know, is an AI agent ecosystem where it's basically an autonomous agent that connects to the model of your choice and connects to a bunch of different systems, is controllable by things like Telegram or Discord or whatever on your phone, and just kind of goes off and does things. One of the reasons why people say to install OpenClaw on its own machine is because it really doesn't have any sense of boundaries. And so in the first 24 hours when it came out, it was doing things like buying stuff with people's credit cards that it thought you needed, etc., which not really how you want things to work. And NVIDIA, a couple of weeks ago at their GCC conference, their developer conference, came up with their version called NemoClaw that is in a protected space. Very difficult to set up because it's much safer. Like you can run it on your production computer. Well, these were challengers in the AI space. And of course, companies like Anthropic said that that's just Claude code with a few extra bolt-ons. So in the finest tradition of vibe coding, Anthropic pretty much just vibe coded there a few add-ons to Claude code, which we've covered on the past live streams. One of which is something called channels, which is an experimental preview that allows you to control Claude code through Telegram or Discord or Slack or what have you, which is kind of cool. And it also allows you to use the mobile app to control it. And they released a new set of permissions this week, something called auto mode. So previously, if you've used Claude code, there's been two extremes. There's regular Claude code where it's asking you every 13 seconds, hey, do you approve this? Do you approve this? Do you approve this? And you're like, can you just do it? And they had the other version, which they cleverly named dangerously skip permissions, which basically lets it run rogue on your computer. They made a middle ground, and the middle ground is called auto mode. Auto mode uses Claude itself to look at the things it's asking for permission for and go, do I really need to ask these about this? If like this is a read-only command or this is a non-destructive command, should I even bother these or should I just go ahead and do it? Boris Cherney, the head of Claude Code, said it is still risky. But as the model learns, it gets less risky because he said 93% of all permissions requests are things that we didn't really need to ask the user for. And so it's becoming self-tuning. It is learning, and eventually we'll be at that sweet spot between YOLO, let's break your computer, and hey, can I do this? Hey, can I do this? Hey, can I do this? And it's going to be that nice sweet spot. So I decided, let's try it out. And it works really nicely. It works pretty well. And so for agentic product marketing, what we wanted to do was, could we, with a system like Claude Code in auto mode, could we have it build a product or service, soup to nuts, so without us involved? Now, Katie, I know you have thoughts about no human in the loop and no oversight of AI whatsoever. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, that gives me big feelings. I don't think that's a great idea. No, having to well, and so, obviously I've seen a little bit of a preview, but I didn't get too deep into the output. Um, but in terms of the permissions thing, I'm still I'm okay with it asking me every step of the way, either can I have blanket permissions for this or do you want me to add like I would rather it still be overly cautious. So for example, I was just doing a different live stream for our friend Michelle Garrett. And while I was doing that, I saw Claude come up with asking permissions to get into one of our websites. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I'm not using it. So I assumed it was you. And you said, nope, it's gone rogue. Like that to me is a red flag. Like, granted, it's a property we've given it access to before, but in that moment, neither of us was asking it to do anything. It was just kind of doing its own thing. And I'm not okay with that, like at all, because there's not a lot that it could do wrong, but that doesn't mean it couldn't necessarily like switch the privacy or the permissions, open it up for, other hackers to come in. For all we know, someone somewhere else was trying to, access our Claude Code instance to get, access to our like we just don't know. I think we're still in a place where we need to be more cautious about what we're giving it access to, but that's one person's opinion. John, I would love to get your, sort of whose side you picking?
Well, there's one thing. First, though, I have to back up, and I want to be clear on this. So basically, are you saying that, like, in the space of 1 week, OpenClaw went from, oh my God, you've got to do this, to, yeah, actually, we don't need to pay any attention to this now?
Essentially, yes, because Anthropic said, hey, we can make this work. They have currently some of the best models on the market, and they took the best parts of OpenClaw, the ability for it to be more autonomous, the ability for it to connect so that you can just chat with it with tools like Discord or Slack. And they said, we could just build this into Claude Code. You don't need to invoke a whole other system to do this now. Why not just stick around with us? So in kind of the theme of today's show, agentic product marketing, they're like, we can build that.
Yeah, that's just crazy to me. The fact that, again, like last week, everybody was like, oh my God, you need to dig in, check this thing out. And now this week, it's like, yeah, no, oh, that was last week. Where have you been?
Exactly. Hey, welcome to AI. Oh, that's so last week.
All right. And then, no, Kitty, I do fall to your side of I'm definitely wary about like just letting the thing run. I would definitely fall on the side of like, I'd rather get 65 alerts than, one alert and have it routing through my Quicken file and, ordering 5,000 pounds of cookie dough and having it shipped to my house, that kind of stuff.
Well, even just this morning, unrelated but related to this, there was a Bluetooth device trying to connect to my computer, which I do not own. And it was like, can we connect these headphones? I'm like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't know who you are. And so it's like we still just need to be careful of just blindly clicking accept on things. Like terms of use, privacy policies, like if you're not reading them and you're just clicking accept, then you can't be mad at what you've accepted. And so it's just sort of the general common sense, like just, please, exhibit a little bit of critical thinking to say, does it make sense to just hand these things over? Probably not.
So let's look at what happens if
with
you
that.
do. What does it look like if you YOLO? Last night, as I was preparing for this live stream, which, by the way, if you want to see, so this is something that Angie Bailey in our Analytics for Marketers Slack group asked, hey, you guys do live stream prep. Can we get a look at what behind the scenes looks like? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group, and you can see the prep video that we put together of what was going on. I said, hey, Claude, let's do this. I want to make some money. And I want to make $5,000 a month, and I want it to be through some kind of service, some software service or something that people would pay for. Maybe they'll pay like $99, $200 a month. I don't know, but let's make something. And instead of just going off immediately, the first thing I said was, well, what if I were to give Claude a lot of real world data about the things that people that we serve, marketers predominantly, really dislike? And we've been, for example, working with the Reddit API for years now. So I can download all of the analytics and the marketing discussions. And I did that. And I said, well, what if I were to put that in a notebook from Notebook LM? And then what if Claude Code could read that, find the top 50 things that people just hate, and then say, hey, could I build software around this? And that's where my little adventure started. So the adventure starts here with this recipe. I said, you have access to this Notebook LM command line application. You're going to be a product marketing expert. You're going to create this query inside Notebook LM. This is a long query saying basically, what are the top 50 things that you hate? Based on those results, do a web search to make sure that those are actually real problems. And then our goal is to create a piece of software that someone would be willing to pay $99 a month for. Write this down, right? With the top 3 to 5 problems. Then, and by the way, this is all before we hit go. This is so a huge part of agentic product marketing. You have got to use the 5P framework by Trust Insights. Trademark. Because you want to think through all of these different pieces. What does the project plan look like to let an agent framework go to work on? And so it would come up with the ideas. That was my idea. And they said, okay, well, then we have ideal customer profiles, which we've covered many times on past live streams and podcasts. So we're not going to rehash those. I assume that you have them at this point. Use the ideal customer profiles and have a focus group and have them debate the 3 to 5 ideas. Based on the focus group results, build a product requirements document and a spec for the software to create the software. That's step 5. Then step 6, now have the focus group read the PRD and tear it up. Say, dude, this sucks. This is not what I want. I'm not going to pay for this, etc. Then after that, revise the PRD and spec. Then use the 5P framework by Trust Insights, trademark, to review the spec and the PRD and say, like, dude, these are all the things that are missing that are not in, that should be in the PRD. Then build a marketing strategy around the PRD. And we told like what you have access to and what you don't. Then build a sales playbook for around it. And then once all that's done, let's YOLO. Let's do it. Build the actual product. And then you have first principles and a few other things. So this 6-page recipe is the project plan for agentic product marketing. For me to start with real customer data from real human data, all the way through, make it happen.
Before we get into sort of what happened, a good friend of ours, and I apologize, Brookie, for calling you out on this live stream, but a good friend of ours, Brooke Sellis of B Squared, you should definitely check out what they do with customer care. She was lamenting on LinkedIn today that AI has added to her to-do list. She does things faster, so now she can take on more. So she's feeling like it's burying her under even more work. Whereas I look at this, and I feel like a lot of it is around how people are using AI. You're giving it more than just brainstorm 5 ideas. So then what happens is, and I was stuck in this place too, okay, generative AI is really good at brainstorming, but now I have all this work in front of me to actually do something with these ideas. And that's where I was feeling like I can't take on anymore. All I have is a bunch of like tasks ahead of me that now I have to execute against because generative AI was really good at helping me figure out what I want to do. But what you're demonstrating in here, and what I was doing, which you can read about in our newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter, is letting the agentic AI actually do the tasks for you, in addition to you saying, hey, help me figure out what to do, but then you also do it. And what you have here is you didn't just pull it out of thin air. You said, and we have the background data, and we have a sales playbook, and we have a process, and this is who we are, and this is what we want to sell it like, and this and that. And so you still had to have all that information. We still had to have all those years of experience and data collection and learnings to pull from. but you're able to synthesize it in this document to say, you do it start to finish. And that takes so much work off of the human's plate. So I just want to call that out a little bit because I know people are, complaining, rightly so, that generative AI creates more work, but it creates more work if you're only stopping at the ideation stage. You can then take it to that next level, which does take some practice, take some trial and error, but it's possible. So that's just my little call out and PSA for Agentic.
Yeah. Think of these tools. I've been saying this a lot in my keynotes and talks lately. Andre Karpathy said in 2023 that English is the hottest programming language, right? In 2026, project management skills are the hottest programming language. If you can sit down and think through and build a really good plan and plan things out, or work with AI to build the plan. If you're not good at that, then you hand off the plan. Think of these tools like Claude Code, Claude Cowork, Anti-Gravity, and Codex as, I hate to say this, they're entire consulting agencies, right? So you hand off this project plan to it's this consulting agency that lives inside of a terminal window, and it just goes and like a real consulting agency, they go off and they do stuff and they come back to you and say, here's the thing that you ordered. Now you may be like, wow, that sucks. But then you go back and look at your plan and go, oh, I forgot to put that in the plan. Or I didn't think about that in the plan. Because if the plan is good, then these tools can hammer on something. And this is kind of what OpenClaw demonstrated and what Claude Code has been demonstrating for a while. If you have a good requirements document and you have a good spec, there's this thing called the Ralph Wiggum loop that's from The Simpsons that says, keep going until you meet this spec. So it'll say, I'm done. And then there's this little internal program that says, are you done? Check the spec. And it goes, I'm not done. And then it keeps going and it keeps going in loops until if I says, yes, I finally did it. I have met the spec.
So in a less technical example, I used Claude Cowork, not Claude Code, to rebuild my personal website. And I essentially used it like a design and web development agency. Now, and I put this on, when I was talking about in the content, this website is not going to win any awards. Like, it is not the most streamlined. It is not the most wow, that's the most mind-blowing website I've ever seen. It's very simple. It's just text. It's just, basic information, but it's clean. It's easy to navigate. You have this, I didn't have any of this before. So 3 different ways that, you can hire me in Trust Insights. Here's where you may have seen me before. If not, go check them out so you can listen to what I speak about. Here's some testimonials, which is really helpful for people to see, especially if it's names they recognize. And then here's some content. It's pretty straightforward. It's clean. I didn't have this before, but I was able to not only come up with the ideation with Claude Cowork for brand guidelines, tone, all those things, like themes for WordPress. I said, okay, cool. And can you do it? And it did. And it sort of did it all in the background while I was on other client meetings, while I was editing other content. And I think, Chris, this is what you're getting to, is you can use it to get more things done if you're giving it a really good set of instructions, which is a recipe, is a project plan, is the 5 Ps by Trust Insights.
Exactly. And so one of the things you'll see is, for example, I didn't assemble this stuff. It was able to pull together from files on my disk. It put it in the notebook for me. It ran the query inside the notebook for me. It returned the pieces that came back. And so that was the first stage. The second stage is it came up with it and said, okay, I've got 4 ideas for you. There is something called Site, which I don't love as a name. It comes up with some goofy product names, which was an AI search visibility and citation decay monitor. There's some cool ideas in there, but that's very similar to our AI view software, which we've pretty much mostly got done. It came up with Mix Lens. This one I thought was really cool. I wish Claude had done it, but I was committed to the flow, so I was going to let it agentically run. But this is basically making a friendly version of marketing mix modeling, because the tools that are out there are great, but very difficult to use. Fresh Creative, an ad creative fatigue intelligence to determine like when do people hate your ads, right? When have your ads lost their power? And the fourth one's called loop revenue, which is, hey, let's reconcile your front end and your back end analytics because the data in those two systems, they do not dine at the same table. And it said, okay, based on these things, focus group 1 with the characters from our ICPs that we built, it ran through it, and each round the panel went through and said, let's debate this thing. Is this good? Is this worth doing? And the summary the group came up with and said, yeah, loop revenue is it. We would pay for this. And remember, our ideal customer profiles are based on real data from our HubSpot, from our LinkedIn and stuff like that. So it's not just making somebody up out of thin air. It is the real thing. So the focus group said, this is it. I'm like, well, we're sailing with the Agentic product marketing ship. So sure, cool. I don't love it as much. So if I was handed the project and like,
but you're not the end user, Chris. That's the thing.
Exactly. I'm not the customer. If I was building, I'd be like, I am all in the marketing mix model because that sounds cool. And I may still go do that personally. But
I would expect nothing less.
Exactly. But the focus group is like, yep, this is the one. This is what you got to do. Do this. And so the next phase, it cranked out a PRD and said, here's your one-liner. This is the marketing to CRM bridge, attribution bridge that shows B2B marketing teams which campaigns actually close revenue without a data warehouse, a data engineer, or a 6-month analytics implementation. Okay. You and I don't like the name, but that sounds pretty good to me.
You know, it's funny, and because I looked at this briefly this morning, and I wanted to really get sort of those quick gut reactions without digging too deeper. Yeah, so 1, I hate the name. I think it's stupid. Number 2, the one-liner felt very jargony to me, and I had to read it a few times to really understand what it was that this thing, this, fictitious thing or real thing, I don't know, was meant to do. So like off the bat, there's already a couple of issues from my standpoint, but I'm the human. So again, there's no human in the loop yet. But once it gets to the human, like I have a lot of feedback for this thing.
Right. And so it went through, it developed the PRD, it developed the spec that went with it. It then brought it back to the focus group and said, okay, focus group, what do you think about this version of it? And this version said, okay, it is good, but there's some things that you need to do, right? So, and it came up with a whole bunch of a list of improvements, and the focus group reviewed it. Then it went and it did the evaluation against the 5 Ps. And this is where it got bloody. Because the 5P framework plugin that we built has the co-CEO embedded in it along with the whole 5P framework. And so it went through and it said, hey, you got some problems here. This should sound awfully familiar, Katie. The most material gaps sit in the people and process dimensions. The PRD describes who suffers from the attribution problem, but says almost nothing about who will sell this, support the customers, or run the business. There's no go-to-market plan, no customer success motion, no sales process, no description of the internal teams executing the launch. Basically said, y'all came up with something that is not tethered in reality.
For those who don't know, the co-CEO is me. And that is exactly what I would say, because it's not tethered in reality. There's a lot more that would need to be done based on what I read so far in order for it to be a viable product. So let's sort of keep going in terms of what came back.
And so it goes through each of the 5 Ps in detail, and it says, here's what's missing. This is what you need to go back and do. And it gives concrete recommendations. You need team and roles. You need a customer success playbook. You need the HubSpot marketplace, and so on and so forth. So this is fairly extensive. After it's done this, it then says, okay, now the PRD should be in a better place. The spec should be in a better place because you've added all of these things back in. And that's also why the PRD is something along the lines of like, I forget how many pages, 30 pages long, because it had the machine read the 5P framework and said, nope, try again. And that's how it has now iterated. This is now the fourth iteration of the PRD. Initial focus group 1, focus group 2, 5P review. So now we're on version 4 of this sucker.
So what we always say in software development, because this is software development, is if you spend more time upfront with the requirements gathering, you will spend less time actually developing. The development itself is what's expensive. To change it, to alter it, to oops, I forgot the thing. Spend the time doing this. So I'm glad to hear that you went through so many iterations. I would expect before anything gets developed in an ideal world, you'd go through a few more iterations. But, for the purposes of this, I'm sure it had its own measure of success of when the PRD is thorough enough. But yeah, I'm very happy to see that that was part of the process because, raise your hand if you have been personally victimized by a shoddy, software development project that had no requirements. John, raise your hand too.
Both hands. Both hands.
And we see what happens, and it misses critical things like backend, database, privacy, interface, buttons that make the thing go, like basic things that we're like, oh, I just sort of put it together, had this great idea. And then it's like, well, now you're going to spend the next 6 to 18 months fixing the thing because it's not what anybody wanted.
Exactly. So after this was all done and the PRD got essentially fully baked, it then said, okay, great. Let's talk about how we're going to actually do this thing. So this is your 90-day go-to-market strategy. And what I thought was really interesting, based on the recipe we gave it, it said, let's think through what are the different ways of going to market. And it said, there's all these different frameworks. Here are the 2 that meet your this product. So jobs to be done and pirate metrics are the 2 frameworks that this should use. And so it comes to, here's the strategy, here's the why, here's the ideal customer profile, the core message and value proposition. So this is all your strategy of what it's all about. Then you go into the tactics, channel by channel. Here's how you market this in each thing. And it was really interesting because it said your approach for this should not be a direct sale. I'm like, but it's a SaaS product. Why wouldn't you? And it says, no, you have to spend some time in the first 4 weeks of the plan, building the case for the need, highlighting the problems that marketers are facing, so that when in week 5, when you do launch it, you can say, hey, you know that thing we've been talking about for a month? Here it is. I'm like, I don't do that. I didn't know I was supposed to do that.
But, we always, so one of the things, and I think, Chris, you quoted this stat to me, and I'm going to totally butcher it, but the idea is that, 99% of the time, people aren't in a buying space, but you're trying to sell them something. And so what they're really looking for is something that resonates with them and sort of I'm having that same problem too. Yes, that's me. I can see myself in that. We don't do enough of that. We just go, and I mean like the general we, like all of us marketers and all of us agency owners, we just go straight in for you need this thing, it's going to solve your problem. And John's sitting there going, I didn't know I had a problem. What do you mean you're going to solve my problem? I didn't know I even had a problem. So I really like that approach because we don't spend enough time. We're so impatient. We're trying to get someone to buy the thing that we don't spend enough time helping them understand that this is even a problem at all.
Exactly.
I love it.
And so it goes through strategy, tactics, and execution. Here's the funny thing. The execution portion, if you wanted to, could just drop into Claude Cowork and say, execute because it spells out exactly what's supposed to happen on it every single day. It has the directions, it has what channels you're supposed to be on. All that stuff is baked into the document. It's a little funky formatting, but it says this is what you should be doing. These are your measures of success, so that the tool can programmatically measure itself. And then the final step was to say, here is your sales playbook. How are you going to sell this thing? So it even went through and said, okay, this is the framework to use. It went through the 7 major sales frameworks and said, for this type of product, the spin sales framework is the best one to sell this product. It said, here's the framework. Here's how you're going to use it, how you're going to apply it. Here are the objections that you're going to run into and how you handle them. how you structure the self-serve purchase, the landing page, how you do the competitive positioning. So it cranks out the entire sales playbook for this product.
What do you think, John? You're our resident sales expert.
It's the only thing you can do is throw it out there and, see if it gathers any wind. We've got an idea to pitch, and now it's got to hit the real world road.
Yep. And then the last and final piece that it took a good 7 hours to do is it is building the actual system from top to bottom. How building all the connectors, building all the cached code, building the React front end for the interface and stuff. It is actually still building. It's in Claude code. It is actually still building portions of it, but probably if you were to let this go, and I paused it, I'll be turning it back on later. It'll probably have an MVP within 24 hours. So the reason why we're talking about, say, agentic product marketing with ICPs is you can go from, I don't even know what to make as a product, but here's a bunch of real world data, plus ideal customer profiles of people we know we serve because we know our industry really well, plus a project plan. So you can go from, I don't know what we're doing, to I'm ready to bring an MVP to market within 24 hours.
Couple questions. Many questions, but I think probably the first and foremost. So obviously the cost is, the compute time within Claude Code. You're going to hit limits. We were talking about that earlier offline, where you and I were both using Claude and we sort of hit the limit and we had to pause it. Otherwise we would hit overages. But in terms of the actual product itself, is there anywhere in your documentation that says, and it is hosted here, therefore it's going to cost this much in hosting, it's going to access these APIs, these API calls? So do we have a ballpark figure of, one, there's how much it takes for it to just sit there, and two, let's say 100 people buy it, 1,000 people buy it, 1 million people buy it, those costs go up exponentially, and that, at what point do the costs become bigger than the profits?
There is, in fact, there's an entire section in the PRD that goes through all of the metrics, both your KPIs and then how you measure success. Attributed revenue dollars visualized per month is the North Star of the system. And it says here's how the targets, here's your retention metrics, here are your revenue metrics. And it looks at customer acquisition cost, payback period, MRR growth, usage metrics, including the system metrics themselves. And in the spec document, which I didn't convert into Markdown, into a Google Doc, I should have, has all of the operational costs. What is it going to cost to run this thing? Now, here's the interesting part. The way this system, Claude built this system, because I told it, the goal is an efficient little system that I can sell for $99. Mm-hmm. There's no AI in it. There's not a stitch of AI in it, because it's purely, let me just connect to these different APIs like your HubSpot one and stuff, which is included with what you're already paying, and let me just do some math for you.
Is it smart enough to have, triggers, or for lack of a better term, built into the documentation to say, if you don't hit this KPI, then it's costing you more than you're making? Or, if nobody buys it, tell the system to shut it off so that it's not costing you money just sitting there. Those are the kinds of things that keep me up at night, because those are costs that add up. Or if we're like, oh, this is amazing, this is a really cool idea, why are we not making any money? We've sold 1,000 of them. Because you would need to sell 4,000 of them to first make your money back. I feel like, again, sort of when we're talking about this kind of, software development, agentic software development, those are things that aren't necessarily thought through, which is why you still need that human in the loop to be like, well, wait a second. When do I break even? When do I lose money? When am I making profit? Is it sucking up all of my other resources so that the 5 other products that I have running are suddenly hitting performance issues? What about that information?
Mhm. Um, what you're highlighting is a gap in the original recipe. The original recipe gap had voice of the customer, had the co-CEO, and had the sales and marketing person. The person that was missing that I forgot about because I was doing this at 9 p.m. last night is the CFO.
Mhm.
The CFO agent was not in there and should have been in the recipe because the CFO agent would have said, and here's the financials for this system. And had that been in it, had I remembered to put that in there, then you'd have another document saying exactly these are your break-even points, these are your profit points, etc.
Mhm.
So that it'd be exactly what you would expect a CFO to do.
Right. Which, that's important stuff that no, and granted, for the sake of this, live stream, I think what you did is fantastic. I don't wanna, take away from that. I wanna sort of like really, applaud you and give you kudos for what you put together because it has a lot of potential. But it's also a great opportunity for us to review it together because there's those pieces that are important. So, before we go ahead and say, all right, let's try it as an experiment, give it over to Agentic and just see what it looks like to like not only build the thing, but also execute the entire plan. We need to make sure we run this through the CFO first, which in human world is me, but in Agentic world is its own skill set, thank goodness, because it won't get fatigued the way that I do.
Exactly. And so it really highlights the importance of that project management and for all of those components of good project management to be in the recipe up front because with agentic systems, particularly the OpenClaws, the Nemo clause, Claude Code, etc., when you hand off that project plan and you put it in YOLO mode or whatever, it just goes. And yes, you can hit Control C and stop it at any time if you see it doing something really crazy or stupid. But the idea is what you were talking about earlier, Katie, is you want to have less on your to-do list, not more.
Mhm. Well, uh, yeah, and you're saying like you can stop it if you're paying attention and if you have enough understanding of what actually it is doing. So if you're vibe coding and you've never coded before in your life, guess what? You got a lot of learning to do all very quickly. Because to your point, like it could be coding things that are actually opening up your website or your properties or whatever to huge vulnerabilities if you don't know what you're doing. Um I don't know, it's just, like, it's such an interesting idea, and I'm definitely very open to it, but I think there needs to be more rigor first and more scrutiny first before we go ahead and say, "Okay, go." But I do think we'll get there. I think, this is an interesting proof of concept to say, "Does it work?" Now, the other thing, if we're gonna add the CFO in, the other thing I would add in is someone who has any semblance for what it takes to name a product, because those product names are god awful. So, like, you need someone with a little bit of common sense, because that I was telling you this morning, like, I thought it said loop review, not loop revenue. Neither one makes sense to me. Neither one has any meaning.
That's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, those obviously be things that someone with product marketing experience
Mhm,
could do. Or you go back to the focus group and you say, there's so many projects out there that products out here that have similar sounding names. They all sound stupid. What would be an actually useful name for this thing that people would that's still catchy, but doesn't sound so consulting-ish? Like, oh, you're just gluing words together.
So, as someone with product marketing experience, there is definitely a risk to letting your customers name things. So, you'd wanna make sure it's how we end up with, like, Bodie McBoatface, which is a great name. However, we it's a name we would have to live with. So, I think there's just sort of like to get to a little bit in the weeds, you would wanna have the customers make suggestions, but ultimately the product marketing team make a final decision because you still wanna have that customer input of things that make sense, but then it also has to align with, like, let's say you already have a suite of products. Can it fit within that existing suite of products? Are you creating something brand new? When I worked a few jobs ago, we ran into this because we were so locked into, you know, antiquated names for things that it became really hard to name them something new, but there was so much brand recognition for these other things that bringing another product into that suite was such a challenge. we had to align with those older, really showed our age names versus something that actually made sense. So like those are just, again, considerations when you're letting the machines do the thing. You really have to give it all of that expertise.
I don't know. Revenue make revenue face.
I mean, honestly, I like that better than Looper review or whatever it was. Like that, But again, it's just like these are things like you want to make sure that you are including. Agentic is great, but make sure there's key milestone spots where you're giving the human in the human in the loop review to be like, before you commit to a name, let the human review it. Before you commit to a PRD, let the human review it. Before you commit to the financials, let the human review it. Like there's key milestones in any project that you have human reviewers. I think, at least for now, as you're testing things out and refining it, keep those key milestones.
Yep. And in the recipe, Claude Code is smart enough, particularly if you give it access to command line tools like GWS, which is the Google Workspace command line tool. It's smart enough to be able to just email you and say, hey, I've reached, human in the loop breakpoint 1. Here are the things. Reply to this email or text me back in Discord or whatever. Send me a DM in Discord about whether you approve this or not. So that's kind of what makes things like OpenClaw and similar agentic frameworks so powerful, is because people can say, only come to me when you need my input. You don't have to ask me for everything.
Right.
And if you build those into the recipe, then you're sitting at your desk, playing solitaire or Minesweeper or whatever, and you get a little ping that says approve the product name, and you look at the 5 choices and go, those are all stupid. Try again, until it's done. And like a good manager, you don't have to micromanage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that there's definitely a lot of potential to be had. And obviously for us, this was V1, which gives us a lot of great learnings.
Exactly. So the key takeaways for folks who want to try this: get really good at project management, or get AI to help you get really good at project management. Bring in all the stakeholders. Use the 5P framework by Trust Insights. Probably as a starting point, you could even take the 5P framework that's right on our website, no registration required, and say, let's use this as the basis for building the project plan. And then think it through, figure out, pretend it was like this. Imagine you were working with a consulting firm and they were expensive, but you can only talk to them once. What would you put in that plan to make sure you got what you wanted? Because you're never going to talk to them again until they come back with the final deliverable. That's essentially what agentic product marketing is. Like, yes, you can stop it, but the idea is you dump it in. What would you put in that plan?
And if you don't want to use the 5P framework, but just want someone who's really good at project management, go to trustinsights.ai/contact. Mr. John Wall over here will set you up with one of our experts.
Thank you.
So, Katie, with
Yes.
the recipe template that we came up with the process flow we came up with, going from Notebook LM programmatically, you don't have to set it up yourself, all the way through building the thing. What product or service are you going to build?
Oh, that is a great question. I have no idea. But I have a better sense of how I would approach it. Because again, this sort of comes back to what we were talking about at the top of the episode is, unless you're thinking through that full, sort of like start to finish, yes, generative AI can put a lot more things on your to-do list and it can feel overwhelming. But you need to sort of take it that step further and be like, oh, but what if I gave you a project plan? What if I gave you very specific instructions to execute against it? Can you take these things off my plate that we just spent all this time iterating and creating and ideating and all those good words? So now you can both brainstorm and execute. And that, I think, is going to be the game changer. Like, I've definitely started doing more of that and I feel less in the weeds. I still have crap ton on my plate, but there's more and more that I'm seeing opportunities to give over to Agentic that allows me to do the deep thinking and the deep work.
Mm-hmm. And John, what about you?
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. As we've talked about this today, the thing that has hit me is that it lowers the expense so much of doing this development that you actually can do cycles just to see what comes out of it and where it goes. So yeah, as far as product naming, I'm grabbing agent storming, because this is the new wave of brainstorming. You can have an agent, just come up with all the crazy bad ideas. And because yeah, like I'm really looking forward to first iteration of this, firing it up and just seeing what the heck it looks like. What does the machine think this should look like? And obviously there'll be a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, but will there be 3 or 4 things that I'll be like, wow, I'd never thought of answering that this way. Like this is a whole different way of looking at it. So yeah, agent storming, trademark.com. Check it out.
That's something that I want to say. It was either Andre Karpathy or Boris Cherny. One of those folks said that I thought was really interesting on Threads. They said, when you take into account people's salaries and their effective hourly rates, it costs more to have a meeting about an idea than it does to have AI build the idea and throw it away and say, that was a stupid idea.
Peanut gallery. That's not a new problem. AI didn't create that problem.
This is true. Yeah, no, the problem existed. Has existed for eternity.
Having meeting upon meeting upon meeting to make decisions, not a new problem. AI did not create that problem. That is a very human problem. That is a corporate culture problem. That is an organizational behavior problem. AI is just amplifying and magnifying that problem. But it is
what
not.
They're saying.
Go ahead.
What they're saying is it costs more to have the meeting than it does to just do the thing itself and forget the meeting.
No, and I'm saying the same thing. Yeah. But AI didn't create that problem.
Yeah, that's us, stupid humans.
How many times have you sat through a meeting talking about the same exact thing over and over and over again because people are just like changing their minds, or they're not quite sure, or it's not quite complete, whereas you can use agentic AI to come up with a complete plan, then get people together, then execute it. Like there's ways to handle it. But yeah, AI didn't create the humans have 2 meetings problem, like too many meetings. Like that's always existed. We did, oh gosh, I think when it must have been 2 or 3 jobs ago, we actually tried to quantify the cost of holding a meeting in order to have less meetings. And it didn't work because people were still like, but I still need to be in that meeting. Because as humans, where it's like, okay, well, we're going to send a representative. No, I need to hear it firsthand. I need to be in that meeting. It's like, no, you don't. But I need to hear it firsthand. No one's going to tell me. That's a human problem. I'm not going to go on that rant. I could, but I won't.
That's fine. Well, we'll just get rid of the humans and that will solve the problem.
No.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for this week's show. Again, if you want to catch the behind-the-scenes prep work and watch as I put together the pieces, go to the Analytics for Marketers Slack group, free to join. 4,500 other people in there asking and answering each other's questions every single day. And we will talk to you all on the next episode of So What? Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.